Hello everyone, and welcome to another Factorio base tour. It has been a very long time since I've done one of these. Life is busy, work's busy, and it's hard for me to kind of carve out time to do these. But I am trying my best to make time when I can, and this is the first one for a long time. And it's very cool, very unique. This is actually by someone I've done another base tour of quite a long time ago. Today we are covering Ellipticality's base, Eye of the Desert. Now this takes a similar principle to their previous base that I spotlighted, where it uses like a distribution core design. However, the previous one I did was primarily bot based, and they wanted to kind of do a different take on it and make it more take the same idea and use belts in the core, and stuff like that instead of just bots. And it makes for a very, very interesting and I'd like to say unique base as well. I've not really seen many bases like this aside from the first one they sent to me. So there's a fair bit to cover here. I'm going to try to go over it the best I can. I will say this base uses quite a lot of circuit network logic, and for anyone who's been around the community a while knows that that is by far my weakest point of the game. Ellipticality has written a very, very detailed and great summary and breakdown for me, which I've read over a few times. I'm going to try my best to follow along and stuff, so do forgive me if there's like a pause here and there as I'm like reading through this again, just to refresh my memory and stuff as I show you things. But what we're going to do first off is just do a very broad overview of the base, and then we're going to get down into the nitty gritty of like how does this actually work and what is the main principle of what's going on here. First off, this looks absolutely amazing. If we really quickly here turn off, I guess these are tags. I guess maybe this is just always on potentially, or these are train stops. Sorry. If we turn that off temporarily, we can get a kind of unobscured view of the base, and this looks absolutely amazing. Like just pure visually, this looks really pretty stunning. And you can see that there's actually a lot of greenery in here. So part of what I wanted to be done with this base was kind of a harmony with nature theme, where Ellipticality only really took out like decoratives and trees and stuff where they had to. Otherwise, they left them in, which I think makes for a very neat like oasis, because it is in a desert, as you can see. And it's kind of this neat oasis here, and it's encompassed by a circular wall, or kind of oval wall, I suppose. And then all this stuff in here you see is actually the power generation. All of this is nuclear power around the base, which I've never really seen it done like this before. In this fashion. Now, a couple notes here is there were no mods used for building this, so stuff was not cheated in. They didn't like use like cheat mode or something to build things. All the things were built, I suppose, quote unquote, legitimately. With normal crafting, there was no major map editing. The only map editing they did was for some of the nuclear like water placement stuff, just because otherwise this would not have worked naturally. But other than that, they didn't like just put in like infinite resource patches. They didn't just give themselves infinite chests of stuff. This was basically all done legitimately, I suppose you could say. So there is that note as well. So now this was designed in creative mode, like in a test map, so like they made the builds, they designed the builds, but then they actually like blueprinted them in here and then made the materials for them legitimately, I guess is a good way to put it. So the target science for the space is 1950 science per minute, which is just under the max of the two rocket silos, what two rocket silos can support. So for anyone who doesn't know, rocket silos aren't actually able to launch a rocket every minute due to the animation and stuff. So with two rocket silos, you actually can't do a full 2,000 science per minute. You can do slightly under that, in this case 1950. So science per minute wise is not massive, but it doesn't need to be, because it's super unique and really, really interesting. So we do have this kind of central distribution core here, which is the main principle of the base. And then you can see that this is kind of mirrored or copied on the other side. So we're really only going to look at one half of this, because the other side is exactly the same, which makes for a very nice system visually. We just don't really need to look at the other side. We're going to just look at this side here. So I'm going to just kind of look through here. So basically the whole distribution system, conceptually, it essentially performs the same function as the main bus, just much more advanced in a way. Many different products are directed into it and ordered in a logical manner. So basically, products for each build here are like ordered from the distribution core via train and combinators and called in here. And it's once we get a real close look at it here, it's actually pretty phenomenal what is able to be done with this, with deliveries and requesting the correct things and filtering stuff out. It's really pretty amazing. And then so basically we have requester stations which request things. Maybe we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here. Sorry. So we'll just look at the builds very briefly. The main part of this again is the logic of it, more so than like necessarily the builds themselves. I mean, the builds are good. There's nothing wrong with them. They're fairly standard in like within the production build itself. So it uses like a combination of belts, direct insertion. You can see, I mean, Red Science is obviously one of the simpler things we could look at, but it is using a pretty standard like eight-ish beacon design, except for these outside ones. You know, this is a very standard design right here in regards to the beacon layout and such. There's just kind of belts going through. Again, though, there's no bots really going on here. So this is all belt-based or direct insertion. I don't really see any direct insertion from trains, which does make sense considering all the logic that has to take place here for the train delivery. But just kind of scrolling through the builds, you know, they're very clean, which is nice, just contributes more to the, you know, kind of visual part of the base. And then they run through, and again, like where possible, they kept water. You can see it's not like they just landfilled and concreted the whole thing. It's just a little bridge through here to get stuff where it needs to go, and it adds a different nice feel to things. I really like it. Rather, I mean, there is of course something to be said for the very industrialized, fully concreted bases, but this is, I like that this is on the other side of the spectrum. So we have smelting and stuff on the left here on this side, and then of course on the other side it would be over here. Pretty basic builds for this. Honestly, it looks like 8 beacons since there's 10 effect sources, and 2 of those are the modules in here. Direct insertion for the, well, kind of direct insertion, not direct insertion for the steel. Basically just spits out the iron here and then is just pulled directly off again for the steel. There's some smarts going on here. You know, just to make things run a little smoother. And then the resources, the raw resources themselves are provided from outside the base. So while the main base is, you know, enclosed in this nice safety circle here, all the resources are, again, gathered legitimately. These patches weren't spawned in. They're all trained in, kind of from all corners of the base, as you can see. And then kind of nice similar wall designs as well to match the main part of the base. Now, biters are on. It kind of, what they had to do for biters was a little bit interesting. This is, I guess, the only part of the map that's like not quite vanilla, I suppose. So the biter settings, basically to avoid green water from pollution and the dead trees, which would kind of be counterproductive for the harmony with nature bit. They had to disable, they had to turn off pollution, and then which basically disables biter attacks. So it's not natural biter attacks, but they did turn on expansion to the max settings. So that basically means that they're still fighting against like just the general expansion of the biters, and like when they hit it with artillery, that obviously sends out attack parties just from that. So the biters aren't on peaceful, really. Well, I guess they are on peaceful kind of, but since they have artillery, when they expand, they attack the artillery attacks, and then the base gets attacked. So biters are still a thing, just not quite to their full potential, which is fine. That's not really what this base is about. And if we take a quick look, just because I'm curious on we'll do that, but then also on the train. Okay, here's how many trains we actually have. So there's a little under 400 trains. There's actually, and then there's more stations than trains, which I suppose makes sense since you have drop-offs and pickups. A lot of it's shared. We have 470 stations and about 400 trains. And a lot of these train names and stuff are just like symbols, which makes sense for what's going on here. There is a live demo that they've set up for me, which is awesome. We're going to look at that at the end once we actually kind of go through how this works. And let's just get into that now. So again, this distribution core concept is that there is the central distribution core in the middle here. And this is where like all the materials are held and then and supplied essentially given to these trains, which are 111 trains, and it's requested. It requests the builds request what they need when they need it, and it is brought over from the distribution core. So nothing is like belted really. Most stuff is not belted directly into here, aside from some of the smelting, of course. But like all of the other products are not belted here; they're trained in here from that distribution core. So these requester stations essentially. So here's our live demo, which I suppose we could try now. It basically has a shopping list. It sends out based on the resources that are needed here, and that will like call a train from the distribution core with the materials that's needed. Now these trains can hold more than just one material. See if we can find one here that maybe does that. These seem to actually all have one material. I'm pretty sure I read in the summary though that they can hold more than one, but perhaps not. But if we go here, we can actually test out this live demo. So I'm gonna go out of map view, hop out of the Spidertron. You can set a shopping list basically by changing this combinator. So you can change this. It essentially just needs to be a quantity of 14 stacks of something, and then it can be any of the set amount of items. I think there's 12 different items that can be requested in. So if we go here and we change this and change this to, let's use green circuits for this example. We'll say 2800, which would be 14 stacks. If we set this and then we'll do this. Now it may take a minute because the train just left, so we need to wait for we actually may need to wait like 2 train cycles for this to actually take effect and call the right thing, because another train may already be on the way here. But in the meantime, we can kind of take a peek at how things are working here. So these here are setting filters, essentially just so we aren't clogging up the belts with what needs to be unloaded here. And then we have this splitter here, which will essentially filter out what it needs to, so it'll stop flowing into the build, like when there's enough of something or too much of something. So you can see this again. This train was already called, so this won't take effect quite yet. But this is bringing in sulfur. If we look at maybe something that's not a demo build, this might be a little more apparent on what's going on with some of this. So a good example, I think, would be this Rocket Control Unit 3 system up here. So we have this system here, and if we take a look, I'm just going to scroll through the explanation here real quick. Again, sorry, I cannot memorize all this stuff. There is a ton of info, and it's quite a lot to take in. So essentially, this combinator here controls how much product should be in each of the 3 chests. So you can see there's sets of 3 chests that have like the same product in the 3 in them, and then the one down here, this guy here, I believe, hovering over this. So basically, this combinator shows the request while the train is en route to the core, and then it's copied and cleared when the train arrives there. So you can see this is set to 749 and red circuit. So I would imagine that is the one that would just came in and it's cleared since the train got here and is now gone. And theoretically, this should have something new to it when a new train is en route. It probably just doesn't need one right now. So the shopping list is saved in these combinators when it departs, and then the list is basically made up of half the number of stacks of items and then the train ID. So the train ID is used to identify the specific request when it copies later. And I know this may be hard to follow along. It's honestly hard for me to follow along. I'm trying my best here. And then so this is basically the general like blueprint and design of these drop-off stations. So this flows over. I'm going to see if I can find maybe another example. So if we look here, so this cleared again, but this one, maybe the one that we saw in here before was this red one that was coming in. And we didn't really check on our demo. We could reset it again, honestly, and it should be fine. Or we'll just infinitely request that, perhaps. And here's like another example. Again, I think these are just going to the same thing up here. But it's a very similar design. So essentially, the builds just call what they need when they need it. So it always has what it needs, but it's not just like always like overflowing on one thing, because it's a very smart system, as we can see. Lots of combinators use. If we mouse over a power pole, we can basically see how many of what trains are like buffered with materials, essentially. So we can see like there's 10 stone brick trains, there's 9 of green and blue circuit trains, etc. If we look, the next point of entry is the entry stations. So if we take a look, so again, this is basically just the same thing throughout these different builds. It's the same concept, so we don't necessarily need to look at every single one. But you can see that there's 4 different sets of 3 chests where each 3 has the same material that's brought in. And then fluids are a little different. We'll cover fluids here in a minute. But if we come down to the distribution core, because this part is different and it's quite interesting. So this is the entry point here. So a requested train can go to one of the 2 identical stations on either side of the base. There's this, and then there's this. Again, the base is copied on either side. And then the entry station has a circuit-controlled signal that blocks the next train from docking, which you can see is happening here. It's controlling the signals for the station here until the previous. So it blocks until the previous train is seated at the loading station. This prevents backups and stuff like that. It also offers refueling if they need it, which is very convenient. This is actually really smart. This is something when you have a central area like this where all trains come. This is a really smart way to do your fueling. Because obviously every train has to pass through here. Instead of like sticking fuel all over the place, you really just have to put it in one spot. And your trains are going to be, and it comes over here too, for the back locomotive. Your trains are just always going to be fueled because every single train has to come through here, right? So this is a really good way to do your fueling if you ever have a central design like this. And then so yeah, basically the stop here is so that they don't want, you don't want docking at a loading station where the buffer chest can't supply it, which is another thing. You don't want a train going somewhere where there's not actually materials for it. If we take a look at this combinator, the Z combinator is where the request is copied from, I would imagine, from the science builds, I think. So you can see this one just popped up. We have input signals, output signals, which seem to match here for iron. It will decide which core station to enable based on the request, right? And you can see it's changing here. So, based on this, it's basically telling the train where to go, or which station to enable, which then tells the train where to go. And then any core station not stocked for the request is disabled with a train limit 0, which obviously prevents any train from going to that station. So then the train gets to the loading station, which we'll take a look at here. So basically the request is copied from here to the station, and then the filter inserters are controlled to fill the train with the correct items, right? So the filter inserters were set to iron because, there are other materials here. We don't want like sulfur or batteries or something being loaded into this when it needs iron. There are, as we can kind of see here, there's 4 express belts going to each station, 1 to each corner of it, essentially, to replenish the buffer chest. So this is done because they need to know exactly how much each quadrant has used, basically. So the way they went about this is load exactly 1/4 of a wagon for like each side here, and then to time the inserters, so the inserters move in 4s and are timed and stack size limited as well, to like really just kind of tie down the ability to limit and calculate how much stuff has been used. So there's 16 buffer chests each, so 2, 4, 6, 8, and then the same over here, with 3 to 4 stacks of 12 different items. As you can see, these have 12, or maybe they're missing some right now, but they can hold 12 different items, about 4 stacks of each in here. And this is not limited in the chest, because obviously you can't really filter that. It is limited by the inserters, which is a good way to do it with these combinators. And then, so this allows the train to be fully supplied by the buffer. Approximate balancing of the chest is important, obviously, since the inserter doesn't have an item. So it doesn't have an item when it's supposed to swing. It doesn't want to be picking up the wrong item, or just like 1 of something when it could be picking up 12 of something. So in terms of replenishing the buffer chest, we can take a look over in kind of the central area here, or sorry, right central. I guess it's over here too, since the base is kind of mirrored. So there's 48 timeshare belts going to the 12 stations again. So there's 12 stations, 3, 6, 12 up here, and then down here are these things, the timeshare belts. So there's 48 of them. Each belt has a memory of the contents it requires, which honestly, that alone is just like insane to me, which I assume would be happening like here, since that's reading the belt. So for an example, say a train is filled with 4,000 iron plates. Each belt going to that station would then have 1,000 iron plates added to the outstanding amounts. Again, because there's 4 belts, like 4 different belts going to each train. If it needs 4,000, there's 1,000 each. The 3 inserters per belt back at the loading can fully drain it by picking up from the far side. So some interesting mechanic stuff too that they mentioned, which I actually didn't know this, is, let me see here. Oh yeah, so the thing with the mechanics is inserters picking up from the far side of a belt are actually much faster, which I didn't know, which is pretty interesting. So they're taking advantage of that mechanic here. And then inserters apparently dropping sideways onto a splitter are much faster. I believe I did know that. So they use these 2 tricks to their advantage to try to make things as efficient and optimal as possible. If we go back to what we were looking at here, so they basically use, if we look, let's kind of get out of the middle there and go like up to the top. So they use like a pseudo 1 to 3 balancer to achieve all this. They then actively balance the resources between the 4 chests. So if we go over, we have a priority splitting here into a compressed blue belt into a red belt, splits the contents 2/3 on red and 1/3 on the other path. This acts as a small 1 to 3 balancer. So yeah, they're just doing like a makeshift 1 to 3 balancer here, by doing 2/3 and then 1/3. And then each belt essentially is connected to every item type, which is nice, since there's so many different things that need to be going in here. One of the biggest challenges actually for this base that they mention is they to make sure that different resources never touch on the belts, right? You don't want your sushi belts. That would kind of mess this up. I suppose maybe that could be done, but I don't really think so. So they want their belts to be just purely one thing all the time. They don't want them mixing in here. And another reason for this too is what I mentioned before with the inserters, right? So if a stack inserter is given a choice of multiple items on a belt, it may choose to pick up like one iron or something when it could have instead picked up like 12 blue circuits or whatever. So just keeping the belts all one item just again makes things flow smoother. Um, and then they basically handled the challenge by tracking where resources are on each of the belts and making sure never to release items at the wrong time. So that is done here. Again, more Combinator madness. The lights are representative of where items are currently located on shared belts. I'm going to be honest, I don't entirely understand this. I mean, I can see them going on and off. Yeah, this is one part that even with the explanation, I don't entirely follow. So they basically track, the purpose of this though is to track it to avoid releasing items at the wrong time where they would then collide with a different item. And they keep track of that here with a visual representation with the lights. I'm sure some of you watching will know what is being done here and be like, "Sturm, you dummy," if you haven't already said that, which is fine if you have. Again, this is by far my weakest point, so I do apologize. I should have given this disclaimer at the beginning, but I do apologize to Ellipticality as well as everyone viewing if I still present things incorrectly or misexplain something. Just even with the explanations, which is very much appreciated and does help. This is just like I'm really honestly terrible with this stuff. So I'm in some cases I'm just reading straight from the thing and hoping you guys understand it because it's really above my head in some cases. But generally speaking, I do understand the concept, and it's honestly quite mind blowing. So they do take advantage of buffering of items as well, which I'm going to see. So that's actually, we're right near that. So in here, they have these buffers for everything. So typically buffers are not really something you want to be doing a lot in the game. But this is an exception to that. And these are actually like very important for the process of this base. Each side of a buffer is capable of absorbing and providing 4 blue belts of items for each item type. So basically a total of 96 belts buffered. It does have some surrogate balancing. You can see going on here with the inserters. So there's circle balancing a belt buffer for desyncs during starting stopping. There's another trick to create compressed belt from 3 stack inserters. So you can see there is only 3, but they're making a compressed blue belt. Even if this weren't backed up, it would be compressed. And it draws evenly from the chest, which can be difficult to do when supplying something like this. So how they're doing this is basically like clocking the inserters, is they're limiting the swing period to 36 ticks. By the way, there's 60 ticks in a second, and the stack size to 9. So 3 inserters times a 9 stack size divided by 36 ticks is 45 items a second, which is the speed of a blue belt. So very, very smart way of doing that. I definitely wouldn't have thought of that. Sorting to the buffers, so obviously making sure that the right thing is going into the right area, and again, not mixing materials. It's done with filtered splitters, which I'm actually not saying because these are not filter splitters. Okay, I might be missing something, but yeah, because these are normal inserters. Unless they're maybe just filtering. Well, yeah, they're not. Maybe they're just telling it like a specific signal. Sorting to buffers is done. Yeah, that would be, unless that's done like back here, perhaps. I guess that's done here. Sorry, from the trains, maybe. Because this, I believe, yeah, this is bringing in raw goods. It looks like, or semi-raw intermediates circuits, because it's unloading. So things like circuits and plates and all that stuff is brought into the core, and then the other trains come in and pick it up. So we already looked at the power pulls. So fluid requests. Fluid requests are a little different. I think they're actually simpler. To be perfectly honest, if we look at, not that, where were our fluid requests? I just saw these earlier. Here we go. So here's some fluid stuff set up. So the fluid request, so they all have purple trains. Each side is a combinator for the requested fluid. A train can support two types. There's actually, yeah, it can support two types essentially. So again, bunch of combinators. Basically, the distribution of it is just decided by which pump turns on. So if we turn off these markers, you can see that there's this is actually an unloading station, but same thing would apply basically to decide which goes which. Is these are just controlled based on like what fluids in the train, I would imagine, and then that way we're not mixing fluids as well, which would be extra bad. If we scroll up, I know I saw fluids somewhere else in an unloading section. I'm trying to find somewhere where they unload, which I may just not be able to do. I think this is where I just was. Oh no, this is an unloading. Okay, so again, yeah, it just decides which pump to turn on, essentially. And that's basically it. I know it was kind of discombobulated. One thing to like really show this is, I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just reload the map, since this will put us back at the start of that. There's the old map, the first one I did for them. It's just gonna take a second to load. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to get this request in before the train leaves. And then we should hopefully see a green circuit train come here since I set the request here. So normally, obviously, we wouldn't be doing this by hand for every station. This is all done automatically. But for the live demo, we can kind of just see live what's happening. Now, those of you who understand combinators and stuff more will probably understand better what was going on. I am going to ask Ellipticality for permission to share the Google Doc they gave me, or maybe a copy of it hosted on my own Google Drive. They don't want it on theirs. And I will also ask for permission to share the map or not. That is entirely up to them. I believe they did share it to Reddit. I didn't look specifically to see if they posted the save there. If the save is posted there, I would assume it's obviously fine to save to share here, so you guys can come in and actually take a look at the specifics yourself. But overall, even though I didn't understand some of it, I am very, very impressed with this. This is super cool. Like the whole principle of of just a central distribution core, and you can see a green circuit train did come. So again, this would be done automatically, but you can see it's pretty smart. Just request what it needs, because this would be set based on what it needs, and send it in. And again, then we have our filter splitter here, because this keeps out what is not needed. So, obviously we're not letting the green circuits in. We don't need those here for blue science. And it's just letting the sulfur in if we actually clear these trees, so I can see what's going on here. Sorry, I know I undid the harmony with nature thing right there, but yeah, overall, very cool. Like I was saying, the general principle of a central distribution core is simple enough, generally speaking, but having it work like this fully automatically, and to just have the builds requesting everything they need, because some of the stuff obviously takes quite a lot of different materials to make. I mean, obviously speed models only take two things, but some of this other stuff takes 3-4 plus ingredients at least. Having those all brought in from just a core filled with different stuff and put into the trains is super impressive. I think actually, if I were to pick my favorite part of the base, don't get me wrong, this is super impressive. I really like this. But what is my favorite part, I think, is this whole section here, is having these trains come in and stopped, and then figuring out what materials are actually needed, and closing off all the stations essentially, except for the one that actually has a material that the train needs. And not only that, but checking the stations to see which station has or does not have the material that is needed, and then sending the train to the right one. This is just super, super cool. I could honestly just sit here and like watch this happen for a good while. I am curious, just out of pure, well, curiosity, if something like this could have been done without the train stop limit. I think it could in the past, because I think you could still turn off stations previously, but the train stop limit, I imagine, makes this easier to deal with. That's just a huge addition to the game that makes stuff like this, I think, a lot better. But just using all these combinators, being able to hook it up to stations and stuff, just watching this go and watching things go to where they need to is pretty dang cool, if you ask me. So this is set to iron. I would imagine this train is going to go to iron once one opens up. So this comes in here. Yeah, and you can see, boom, iron right there. And there was iron here, but there's already a train here, and no other station was available for iron. So we look at this. This is steel. Bet you this is going to be steel, obviously. That one was coal, so it's going to come down to where coal can be supported. And coal was already in here. I didn't see it on the belt, or am I just blind? Oh no, it was kind of already in here. This is super cool, man. I love this so much. I hope you guys enjoyed. I think this is a good place to close it out as we just watch this. I'm also just generally mesmerized by the visual quality of this. But I hope you enjoyed, despite my probably not great explanation of things. I guess one last note is just the train network in general that I didn't cover. There's essentially an inner and outer train network. The networks from the core to here, to the production areas, are disconnected in the fact that you have to like transfer from one to the other to kind of to kind of get there. So these come in here, right, and then they go into the station and they back out and then go over to the other one. But there's kind of a flow of things. Trains come in like here this way on these 3 tracks here, and then so this would be like the outer network, I believe, essentially out here and out here. You can see the trains are here flowing another way. Now some stuff like artillery and ammo supply can cross over, but generally speaking, stuff can't really. We didn't really take a look at like the circuit builds, but I mean they're pretty straightforward. They're good builds, very compact. I don't want to say nothing to see here, but compared to the rest of the base, this is pretty standard, honestly. I mean, obviously the same station stuff is still taking place here to bring the stuff in that's needed, but and take out what's needed. You can see more fluid going on here. This is actually not a smart fluid system. Probably just doesn't need to be for this, but just general circuit smelting stuff going on here. I do like that they have the dedicated smelting basically for each thing. So like the copper is just smelted and the iron is smelted here for the green circuits and the red circuits, I suppose. Just makes things a bit easier. And then we have blue circuits. Yeah, more green, solid fuel. I actually didn't look. I know I said we were going to end, but I didn't actually look at oil, which is oil just coming in pre-refined? I'm trying to find it. Oh no, here we go. The icon blends in a little bit. So I'm sure there's more than one of these throughout the map, but fully beacon, of course, moduled. Makes all the stuff which flows throughout the tracks. I like that too. And is loaded in here. Again, not really many smarts going on here. There doesn't need to be at this stage. So there's one here, and then one here, and then, yeah, again, here and here. So I like just very symmetrical here on the base. But anyway, this will actually be a close. Thank you all so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I will try to answer. I know in the last video, Ellipticality was reading the comments and stuff. So if Ellipticality sees comments down there, if you feel like you want to answer stuff, if people have questions that maybe I messed up or that I didn't cover or something, that would be awesome too. And then if I get an okay to share the map, I'll put a link in the description. Same with the summary as well. And then I also will link in the description the previous base I covered it there. If you want to see kind of a comparison, which was I think a couple years ago at this point, but I will link it in there as well as the whole playlist for this bass tour series. There's a bunch of truly amazing basses in this playlist that people have sent to me, and I have a lot more to do. I'm gonna try to get to them. This is the first of hopefully many, and again, thank you all so much. If you did enjoy, a like is appreciated. If you're new, feel free to subscribe to see more stuff like this. And for now, that's gonna do it. Until next time, I look forward to seeing you all, and do take care.